a school that helps children go through their adolescence to be ultimately independent adults. Like, I think that is, I think that's pretty common with all of the parents. I think children that are, that are gifted and have interests that are not necessarily be accommodated by usual systems, I think they gravitate towards the Element High School as well.
I'm Glenn Herbert, and I'm an editor with Our Kids. We're speaking with insiders from Canada's leading private schools to gain insights into their programs, culture, traditions, and leadership. This includes insights from parents, alumni, and administrators. This is the Our Kids Insider Perspective.
Sure. So to be honest, I'm actually an alumnus of the feeder elementary school that is the base for the Element, which is Ottawa Montessori School. And so I went there for 5 years when I was young and had a wonderful experience. It was kind of the most formative educational experience that I've ever had. And I've been to some great high schools and universities and really enjoyed every stage, but it really made a big impact on me. And so when we first came to Ottawa from Toronto, I, did a bit of arm twisting with my wife to convince her that that's where we wanted to send our kids. And it was a bit of a hard sell for her. She had certain notions about what a Montessori school entailed and stuff like that. And I told her, this is a place that I know is really solid. We had an excellent experience. They went there since the age of 3, and they have now graduated from from Ottawa Montessori School. And at that point, it was really a question of, do we want to take them somewhere else, or do we want to stick with the high school experience for this school? And it was a new school. There were a lot of question marks as to what the educational experience would be like and so on. But they had such an amazing educational basis and such a vision that they presented to us that we sold on, and we haven't looked back. We've stuck with them through it all, because at every stage when we've looked at alternatives, nothing else has been nearly as appealing.
Yeah, I mean, it was a combination of our discussions with the leaderships at the school, and also just our kids really engaging in that process too, right? It wasn't our decision only, especially when you're doing the grade 8 to grade 9 jump. And we gave both of our children the opportunity to make choices, and sort of different private schools, public schools. We sort of, kind of laid all the options out, and for both of them, ultimately, I have to say, chose the Element actively on their own, partly because of what they knew and what they saw moving forward. And so, yeah, it was a combination of our discussions, and I think it really helped them to also have had access to spending time with the Element grades and visiting and being part of that campus, even in grade 7 and 8. So I think that was really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Our boys are very different personalities from each other. So I think it's important to put that at the outset. And what's amazed me is, regardless of which of our children you're talking about, and also their friends and peers that have stayed with the system, they all love it. They're really excited to go to school. They're really motivated. They feel very close to their teachers. And, I have to add that the pandemic and the switch to, online, or, sometimes we're back in house, and just the way that the Element has navigated that for them at this stage has been so stabilizing. And I really think helped them emotionally progress through this. It's really fascinating to see. They have this mentoring system, right, where they match the students with a teacher, one of the faculty who is their mentor, in addition to the actual teachers teaching their subjects. And their mentor is kind of always checking in with them over the year. And, sometimes it'll be the same mentor year to year. Sometimes it'll change based on their needs, but that person is kind of keeping a global eye out and really addresses maybe anything from their like emotional experience to career planning to, just troubles at school, like that are just irritating them or things that they're working through. So it's a really nice relationship. And then also the relationships that they have with their individual teachers, just because they're in the same program for so long. So they have the same teachers over and over again. They really get to know their personalities and, befriend them in a way that's like they have a guiding force. And so they really know them and they can respond to them individually. So even though they're two very, very different people, it's really been quite amazing how the school has really supported them and their strengths and then and also their weaknesses, and really attended to the challenges that each of them face.
And how is that translated to the home?
I think, in some ways, home is a bit of a safe environment where they can kind of let loose and be different people. But no, a lot of the ways in which the whole philosophy of the element is really treating children and students with respect, basically treating them as if they're intrinsic learners, as if they're motivated and curious about their natural and social environment, and they want to learn more about it. And so that kind of innate curiosity that gets fostered, and the very first step is just treating kids as if they don't need to be forced to learn. All they need is the right environment. All they need is the right encouragement. All they need is someone to direct their interest, to make sure that they're, spending enough time doing enough diverse things and so on. But it's really a self-motivated type of learning. And that translates so nicely into the home environment where we see, they'll pick up a book on some subject, they'll do some, internet search, they'll watch some YouTube videos to explore more about something that they, some offhand comment that the teacher made in class, some speaker who came in to talk to them about something. They have one of the amazing features of the program is the so-called AWOL, the Authentic World of Learning, where every Wednesday the high school students go out for the afternoon and they take one aspect of what they're currently learning in school and they kind of apply that in a real world environment. So it could be going to the ICU at the Ottawa Hospital. It could be going to the Carleton Geology Department. It could be going to Hogsback Falls to learn about sedimentary rock or something like that. And the ways in which that twigs things, and then they come home and they'll explore that further. So that curiosity that gets fostered at that place, I think, is really constantly being expressed. And the kinds of questions that they ask us and the other adults around them, it just manifests itself in so many different ways.
I would also.
Sorry, go ahead, Jasmine.
Yeah, no, like the only thing that I would also add to that is that it's kind of pretty impressive, the level of conversation that you can have with these guys. Like they make us think. And when we are out with family friends or, they're not afraid to speak to adults, and they are really self-confident, like a mix of self-confidence and respect and, sort of like socially appropriate, where if we're talking politics around the dinner table, they will get right in there with their opinions, but they'll also step back and hear aunts and uncles and grandparents' opinion and be able to digest and challenge and push the conversation further, just like any other adult at the table. And the other thing that's really remarkable is, with their little cousins and family friends, younger children, they're so caring. And, these are teenage boys, right? But they are so attentive and loving and patient with, younger people. They really have a sense of like life cycle too, that I think.
I think, it'd probably be slightly different in each child's case. I think if we asked our eldest, I would predict that he would say, probably the relationships he has with his teachers.
100%.
That's been really the kind of core grounding feature of his experience at the Element, has been kind of the ways in which he can feel that they respect him and yet will challenge him as well. It's a safe and respectful environment in which he can try out ideas, he can ask questions, he can go to them for extra help, he can just bother them if he's curious about something, and they will take the time. No matter how busy they are, they will take the time to sit down with him and explain things further and ask challenging questions back at him and stuff like that. Or, if they think he ought to be able to answer this, to throw the question back at him and just say, so Soren, why don't you work this out for me, and explain to me what you think, what would your ideas be about this? And it's that kind of respectful, non-hierarchical relationship between equals, but where the teacher is also a source of knowledge and of learning and of maturity and a kind of role model in many ways. I think that's been really impressive for him. I think Josha gets a lot more out of kind of the social community aspect of the school. It's something that's really struck us throughout our time with the school is the ways in which the school fosters a sense of community and fosters the notion that education doesn't work on an individual basis. It works in a community. You're learning as a community. And it challenges the kids to feed off of and to learn from and to ask questions from one another, to one another. Every week they have a half-hour community meeting on Fridays where they all get together and they throw out problems, they problem solve, they throw out challenges. They, occasionally will say, something's, I'm having a rough time in my relationship with you, and they might address another student or another group of students and try to hash this out in a communal fashion with kind of, with being guided by the teacher, but having as little kind of direct forced imposed rules as possible. To the extent possible, the children are responsible for coming up with their own solutions. And this is something that I think really comes across in the friendships that they have, but also, like everybody picks their friends and has their friend groups, but the school also challenges Josha to get out of his comfort zone and to force him to get along with, or at least, work together with other kids in his cohort that he might not necessarily find the most appealing to hang out with and stuff like that. But, it's part of the real world that you need to be able to communicate and to work together with other people.
So I am, in my profession, I am a psychiatrist. And so obviously mental health and emotional resilience is a really important topic for me. And I really wanted an educational system that was going to be a source of strength to my kids, as opposed to a source of stress or, kind of impacting their self-esteem. Like I really wanted, it's important to us as a family, and I really wanted the place that they spend most of their time to reinforce that. And that is something that I value so much in the Element, and it's comes out in so many different ways. So I mean, we already talked about the close relationship that they have with their teachers, right? So as they leave our nest as adolescents, which they're supposed to do, we have a really great sense that they're, in the company of other adults who are, mature and just good people, grounded people that will give them the guidance that they need and help to shape, like they're not just sort of like left to their own devices with a whole bunch of friends. They have guidance there. That's not us, because they don't always want it from us, right? But there's a good, next step, which I think is so important. And they see the value in that. And then also, the system has really helped them to develop a sense of self-evaluation, right? So self-reflection is really important. At every parent-teacher interview, they have to prepare to talk themselves like they lead the interviews themselves, so that they have a sense of their strengths and weaknesses and what next steps they could work on. And again, meeting with their mentors or teachers regularly to see if that plan is working or do they need to modify it. And just that ability to feel very comfortable with taking an inward look and not feel threatened by that, and feel like that's an important constructive part of the process is so great. Because they want to improve, and they are, constantly, they don't even realize they're kind of constantly scanning themselves and their environment to see what could be better. So that emotional resilience, I think, really sets them up well for next steps. And for me, that was a very, very high priority, in addition, of course, to a solid education.
I think, I think the thing that, at least for us, as a family, was always a challenge and something that made us consider at the various points where we had where was a logical point to possibly make a move, was the fact that it's a very small school. Just in terms of sheer size, it's and that has amazing benefits, but it does have a cost. And I understand those of their friends who decided at some point that they wanted to have a quote unquote regular high school experience and so on. But at every stage, I think we've been kind of convinced that that the benefits, which are substantial, really outweigh any of the possible negatives. And and there are always costs to go into any school. There's no perfect school, but this is it's the chance to be part of a community in which really builds their confidence and prepares them for a world where they're going to walk out there and face daily challenges and not be scared of those challenges. They're going to have a sense of groundedness, a sense of a willingness to reach out to help others, or reach out for help from others, including their teachers, including their university professors, and so on. That's something that that's been really impressed us. So that there are certain facilities that are lacking because of the relative youth of the high school part of the school, and the smallness of the actual enrollment. So, for example, not having a dedicated gymnasium facility has been a challenge, especially for our eldest child, who's really into team sports in particular. There's all kinds of things that they've managed to do by using the Lansdowne Park environment, which has so many resources to offer. They've used the outdoor facilities there as well. They've done physical activity courses at Good Life. They've done an amazingly creative set of things, but just lacking that one dedicated gymnasium facility is another thing that does have its costs. So.
I don't know that it's a surprise, but it's always pleasant. So, we ask our kids almost every year, or like when they're having significant problems, like, are you sure? Is this the right place? Like, we can always change. And they always themselves choose to stay at the Element actively. And that's, again, I'm not surprised, just because we see it as the great school for them, but the fact that they would continue to choose over things like team sports and lack of a gym, and small social size, or their friends leaving, that they would still continue to actively choose that when given an option. It's nice,
So I would say, again, as I believe I mentioned earlier, one of the things is just this kind of fundamental respect for the intelligence and the intellectual curiosity of the child. And so, and associated with that is kind of a really close attention of the entire pedagogical curriculum and the setup and the training of teachers and everything to how children progress and change at different stages of their life, right? So they have different needs, they have different abilities. They've got, teenagers have so many things that are going on in their lives, both socially, they're exploding cognitively, and some of these physically, and some of these things are positive, and some of them are challenges too. And so, the way in which the curriculum is really molded at every stage, the element itself is divided into three different groupings, right? There's the grade 7 and 8 group, which is called E1, element 1, the grade 9s and 10s, and then the 11s and 12s. And each of those has a somewhat tailored curriculum. They have different activities. They have different ways of interacting with one another. They have different spatial setups in the school, and all of these. And one of the things that's quite impressed us too is the constant. They don't only teach the kids to constantly challenge themselves and to be constantly learning and evaluating themselves, but the school's doing it too. And without being too experimental, they're constantly checking what's working, what's not working. Are these techniques that we've used and have had success with previous classes, are those actually working for this particular class? Because every class has its own chemistry, its own makeup, its own needs and challenges and abilities. And so this constant flexibility, but with a guiding, coherent vision of what drives education that is really so unique to this school. I think those are some of the amazing things about it.
It's a really good question. I think most of the families, they value education, right? Like they're really invested in not just sort of like they actually value the content. It's not sort of some glossy enrollment, or like it's actually the substance of the schooling that they value. I think most of the families there also are very attuned to wanting a school that helps children go through their adolescence to be ultimately independent adults. Like I think that's pretty common with all of the parents. I think children that are that are gifted and have interests that are not necessarily be accommodated by usual systems, I think they gravitate towards the element high school as well. I don't know, what else would you?
Yeah, no, I think definitely, a real interest in most families that come to the element tend to be really invested in education for their kids. Whatever that means. It's not always, they don't always have a very precise notion of what they want, but when they see it, that they recognize it. Yeah. And that's something that I think attracts them to this model. It's a combination of a really, in some ways, a very flexible and tailored learning experience, and yet behind it is kind of a coherent universal vision. And so it really combines the best of both worlds, because it's got this underlying philosophy of the Montessori pedagogy and so on, which animates its principles and the way the teachers are instructed and so on. But at the same time, it's got the Ontario curriculum that it has to follow, and it manages to kind of instill creativity in kids, and a sense of curiosity. I think it also tends to attract families where they're not just interested in rote learning. They're not just interested solely in achievement, but in producing these whole children, grounded and grounded people, yes, who can really contribute to the community, who have a wider sense of the world and a wider sense of their place in the world and the importance that they contribute to that world. And that's something that I think
it's been challenging, to be honest, with the pandemic. So that's really affected things. So this year aside, I think there's a real, especially because there is the feeder school from the Ottawa Montessori, that tradition carries upwards. And then there is like this drive to connect, to understand, because it's so small, we all know each other's kids, and before they're driving or before they're mobile on their own going around in the bus and stuff like that, we're in the beginning stages helping them to get together after school and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a really good friendship and camaraderie. And then just there's regular drop-ins with coffee houses with the teachers and the events at the school. So we get to know each other there. It's also kind of, the kids don't really want us involved at some point. So that's good. And maybe sometimes hard to cope with as parents. But, I think that's part of the natural progression, is that kind of it's more the kids, especially in the later stages of the high school, that are really running the show socially. The praxis project, eh? Yeah, that's something huge.
Yeah, so our eldest son, Soren, part of the grade 12 curriculum at this school is, kind of engaging in this very substantial independent project. Something, similar to, for example, the IB's independent project or extended essay. And it's called the Praxis Project. And in keeping with the philosophy of the school, it's really about not only kind of doing a deep dive in some subject on an academic level, starting to engage with scholarly and university texts and sources and so on, but also doing it in a way that applies it to a real world challenge. And so, one of the values of the school is really connecting the intellectual with the practical and even the ethical in some ways, your responsibility to the wider world. And Soren, for this project, actually wanted to, as kind of a lifetime student of the Montessori system, wanted to kind of look into, in some ways the element is an experiment, because there are not that many Montessori high schools out there. And Maria Montessori herself didn't actually leave much in the way of guidance for what a high school in Montessori principles would look like. So he wanted to kind of do a deep dive, and what he ended up doing was contacting a bunch of Montessori high schools, so the few Montessori high schools that exist around the world, from Europe to the United States to New Zealand and Australia, and kind of sending them a questionnaire and finding out what were the strengths and weaknesses and the unique aspects of their different programs and how did they run things, and then kind of collating it together and then producing this as kind of a bit of a blueprint for what a Montessori high school might want to look like in terms of what a curriculum. Somebody who wanted to construct a curriculum from scratch, what kinds of things might they be able to do. So that was a really it was a big challenge, but it was also very personally meaningful for him, and that was something that I thought was really impressed us.
Yeah, I was gonna tell you about Josha, our youngest. So he had a science project that he had to do. They have these independent research projects where, sky's the limit, but you have to meet certain ministry criteria to check off the boxes, right? And so he's very into history, as we told you. And so where he took his science project was to build this humongous 3x4 what is it even called?
Ballista.
A ballista. So this is like this medieval
siege engine.
Siege engine, right? Like that they used to use in war, and you kind of put these I guess cannonballs in it, and it works, right? And he built it in the basement himself, and just with a little bit of help, to manage some of the bigger power tools, but it's huge. We don't know what to do with it. It's if we ever get attacked, we've got, we do have some weapons in the house based on that. So yeah, no, it was physics, and it was history, and it was getting it right, and engineering, and yeah, it was all of those things.
So, we've talked a little bit about how Soren how his experience in his relationships with his teachers has been such a fundamental part of why he values the school and his experience there. And I've got to say that for our part, we've always just been really, really impressed by the teachers. It's just a really nice mix of being, a lot of them are youthful enough to be able to connect to the students in a meaningful way, not trying to be their friends, but being the kinds of people that the kids don't mind looking up to, whereas, their parents are kind of old fogies and they don't want anything to do with them. They're kind of defining their identity against their parents, but for their teachers, I think there really is this kind of implicit role model function that they play, and that they've really taken on and take seriously. In one of the things that I mentioned earlier was, Soren's experience and their availability and accessibility going beyond working hours, answering mails on weekend, just their willingness to go out of their way to do, and the amount of extra time and effort that they put into extracurricular events is just astounding. So, and we've had the same experience too. They've really, they're constantly, talking to us, asking for our input, taking it in. And if we express things that they're not interested in, then that's fine. But, they're willing to listen, and they're very responsive. And the administration has really a lot of the same features.
Sarah Wheeler is the Element director. She's the director of the Element, and the upper school, right? So grade 7 and beyond has really been her project since the beginning. And she's so well versed. She herself is a certified Montessori educator, and she's just brought this into the adolescent, like first to the junior high and now the full Element high school. The program that she's developed is honestly one of the leading programs, and like you can see newer Montessori high schools reaching out and emulating what they've created, in different parts of Canada. So it's really, it's so fundamentally rooted, and she herself is such a grounded, available, and really just great person to have running the school. And then Carrie Whalen, who is the head of schools for both the Element and the OMS. She's again a really solid Montessori certified teacher in and of her own right, but just as a, she's just got an incredible vision for where the institution as a whole is growing, and the way that she's been able to grow the school and the enrollment, and between the two of them managing the pandemic. I can't say enough about the kids' experience through this pandemic. I mean, we all know it's been awful for teenagers, especially, right? Like the lack of sense of control, and like the educational inconsistency, and just a lot of kids are really struggling. And I have to say that our kids and their peers, knock on wood, but they are okay, right? Like it's not ideal, but the way their teachers and the school as a whole, felt so comfortable with all the different precautions and the way that they've managed things. We've always been really comfortable sending them to school, and really comfortable with the changes that they've instilled when there was more of an infectious concern. And the teachers, the creativity, I mean, what they do, like there's a bit of sense of mourning about all the things that they missed out on because of what the program usually entails, but what they were able to do, and the creativity with which they conducted school in the last year and a half has been, we really couldn't have asked for more. I don't think that their education has really suffered. Like I really don't feel like they're behind in any way. I think if anything, that they've grown out of this experience because their teachers helped them to do it, and the school has been such a stable presence. I think it's a no-brainer personally. I think parents should enroll their kids because they're going to get a really solid education, but more than that, they're going to get humans that know themselves and know their strengths and know how to keep pushing boundaries based on the strengths that they have. And then thirdly, they're also going to get children who are just grounded and able to connect to their community and give to their community in meaningful ways, and feel a sense of responsibility to their community, and be able to get the support that they need. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. So yes, absolutely. I recommend enrollment at the Element. I think the system may not be for everyone, but it is a powerful system for most kids and most families. And I think what you can expect to get from the Element is, first of all, a really rigorous yet interesting and kind of inspiring education, an education that is going to turn your child into somebody who resents or finds school boring, to somebody who's actually excited to go to school and excited to learn, and is going to continue to keep pursuing knowledge in all facets outside of the school environment, and obviously going forward. I'm a university professor. I really care about education. I really care about education at the post-secondary level. And the kids today are, in some ways very strong, very good at doing things if you give them a very strong structure and a very explicit set of instructions. Not always as good when they're often quite lacking in confidence when it comes to open-ended such situations, like most of the situations in real life and in the workforce, where you're going to have, where even defining or grasping the parameters of the problem is the biggest challenge to even begin to formulate possible solutions to problems. And it's that kind of independent curiosity, but also the confidence in your own ability to go out and find out the knowledge that you need and to define what it is that you need to go after, that I think really persists with kids. And then I think, yeah, as Jasmine's mentioned, kind of the combination of the resilience, but also kind of this is an old-fashioned term, and I don't mean it to come across in the wrong way, but kind of there's a moral wholeness about kids who come out of that program that I think, it's not driven by any particular ethical philosophy or something like that, except a sense of that children need to be responsible to themselves, and kind of encouraging that sense of responsibility to who you are and to what your principles are, whatever they may be, is something that I think really resounds later in life. So I think these are kids who, it's not a flashy school. It's not a boutique learning environment where you get a la carte choices of whatever you want, all the kinds of options and stuff like that. But it is a well thought out, grounded, coherent philosophy of education that produces not only really intriguing lifelong learners, but also decent human beings who are going to go on to become good public citizens.
Oh, for me, that's easy. It was really hard. We worried, especially growing up in Ottawa, raising a family in Ottawa. You really worry about French immersion and being bilingual at the end of your education, and also just university placements, and what about clubs, and what about all of these things that we associate high school with, and what we look for at the end of high school. It was really hard to sit on our hands with some of those anxieties because we just didn't know, right? And it wasn't clear to us. It's not, there are marks, but it's not marked focused, right? So it was really hard for me, especially as somebody that wasn't educated in the Montessori system, to kind of sit with that concern of is this really working? Are my kids actually learning? Are they going to do okay in life? And here we are with the son about to graduate, and I couldn't be happier. He's, to some extent, to have faith in the system, but also to ask questions, right? Of parents with older children and who are further ahead in the system than yours, as well as to talk to the teachers and the leadership, just to understand it more, because it is hard to see it on a day-to-day basis, how it's working. And you kind of have to, it's a system that you need to experience in some ways, but you can also be better informed about. So I think, yeah, getting that feedback from other people that have been through it.
Just going off of what Jasmine said there at the end, my single strongest piece of advice for anybody considering, enrolling a child at the Element or at its feeder school, Ottawa Montessori School, would be to go in and watch. Just look at how the classroom runs. Look at how these kids operate in their environment. It's easy to have preconceptions about a way that a system like this would work. It's hard to have faith that children can actually learn from one another and can really drive their own education through their own intellectual curiosity. Go in, watch for a day, and then talk to some kids, because that's in some ways that's the most impressive thing, is listening to some of these kids, their lack of fear in front of adults, their quality of expression, their reflexive qualities, their ability to really, their thoughtfulness, their ability to really consider things, and but also their willingness to listen to others. They're not just opinionated, which they are sometimes, but they're opinionated with an openness to being, shown that maybe things aren't the way that they assumed. And so just talk to some kids. I think that's the best piece of advice I could give.
Let your kids spend a day there too. I think your kids will feel that difference, and they will see that it's an environment that they could potentially thrive in.
For more information about this school, you can visit their profile at ourkids.net.